not only does it poison you, bitterness poisons your relationships with other people and your relationship with God. The person you're bitter with might be going gone, but you start seeing the things that bothered you about them in other people. And you're like, hey, you're just like this other person. And then you start pointing your bitterness towards them. It's like your bitterness is floating around just looking for people to attach itself to. It's not going to just stop with that one person. A few years ago, I was really sick of dating. And as I think about it now, I realize I was bitter at some of my previous boyfriends and just the unhealthy relationships that we had. But I didn't know it at the time, but the way I know it now is that I would get offended by any guy who showed an interest in me. So there was this one time where this really nice guy I met through church, you know, we were having a good conversation, and he's just like, would you want to get coffee sometime? You know, totally respectful, didn't do anything wrong, and I'm like, luckily I didn't say this, but in my head I'm just like, who do you think you are? How could you ask me something like that? You disgust me. I was just like, scum of the earth. Who do you think you are asking me something like that? Go get coffee with you. This guy did nothing wrong, right? I was just, like, my bitterness that I had towards dating and relationships in general, I was just, like, thrown onto him. And I couldn't tell the difference, right? 1 John says, if someone says, I love God, but hates a Christian brother or sister, that person's a liar. For if we don't love people we can see, how can we love God whom we can't see? That's a great question. You're deceiving yourself to think that you can hate this person and keep this bitterness against this person and not have it affect your relationship with God. No way. God says, absolutely not. That is not how I work. God says, I know better than you. I can see. You're blinded and in darkness. You might not even see how badly that your relationship with God is suffering until you choose to let go of the bitterness, until you choose to forgive. And then it might only be from that vantage point that you look back and realize, wow, I was really closed off to God. So, bitterness is bad, right? We don't want to get stuck in this, but it's really easy to. So we need to think about how we can actually forgive people and let go of this bitterness. So, how do I forgive? Well, first thing, you need to understand what forgiveness is. That's important. This guy, Tim Keller, says that you have to realize that forgiveness is given often for a long time before it's felt. So you might choose to forgive someone, but not even feel like doing it for a long time after that. Forgiveness is not a feeling, but a series of actions, a promise not to demand payment for the sin from the person who wronged you. This promise involves repeated decisions to give up seeking revenge. It is hard and, for a while, constant. But if this promise is kept, eventually the feeling of anger will subside. So it's like they wrecked your car, right? And every week now you have to pay these payments that, keep coming up. You have to do it over and over. But eventually, your feelings will line up with your decision to forgive. Forgiveness is not forcing or denying feelings, but a promise made and kept despite our feelings. So, forgiveness is not a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice. You might say, well, I can't forgive this person because I don't feel it. Well, that might have been true before you knew Christ. But if you have God's forgiveness in your life, you have a basis for forgiving other people because you've experienced His forgiveness. You have a new power inside of you that makes it possible for you to forgive. And like I said, the feeling might not be there, maybe not even for a long time, but eventually it will come. But you can't wait on that to choose to forgive. forgiveness is also not just forgetting what they did or justifying what they did. It's not that you just can't remember that they hurt you or that they did something wrong. It's not pretending they didn't do anything wrong. If they didn't do anything wrong, you wouldn't need to forgive them for anything. So it's not denial, but it's a choice to take on the payment for what they did instead of holding them to it. Also, this is really important. Forgiveness is not trust. Forgiving someone does not mean you're going to put yourself in the same situation to get hurt over and over again. When you forgive someone, you might have to say, you know, I forgive you, but this relationship is still over. We're done. You might have to say, I forgive you, but you're fired, and I don't trust you. Or maybe I forgive you, but you're not allowed to be alone with me anymore. Forgiveness is not trust. Trust is earned. But forgiveness can be given without saying you trust the person. The second thing we need to do in order to forgive is encounter God's forgiveness. This is the problem in a lot of our lives. We have never experienced God's forgiveness. And our verse said that we should forgive others just as God in Christ forgave us. But if you have never been forgiven through Christ, then you can't do that. And so this might be what a lot of us need to do, is get in touch with God's grace. The fact that He put all that you owe Him onto His Son. And He wants to have this relationship with you and not hold this payment against you. When you get in touch with how much He's actually done, how He's forgiven you for everything in the past and everything in the future, then you're more able to forgive other people. Tim Keller says, if you cannot forgive, it is because you're sure that you are not as sinful as the person you're mad at. You know, if you really understood what God has done here, you'd be quick to forgive. Who here feels like they need more money? Yeah. What if I were to drive to your house and start unloading this into your garage?
That's pretty good. I think you jokes.
This is basically what God has done for every Christian. He's given you like $1 billion in cash. And as He's unloading these stacks of cash money into your garage, you know, it's like, who am I to get mad at this person who owes me $20? Who cares? Keep it. I'm rich. I got a garage full of cash.
Those are hundreds, right?
Okay, why would it matter?
It's too blurry. I can't
That's
tell.
gotta be millions.
It's a lot, though.
It could be
I think there's
$1
some
bills.
foreign currency, too, so you can travel. When we realize that we've been forgiven for so much, we can forgive other people for what they've done wrong against us. Has anyone here experienced this? How has thinking about God's forgiveness for you helped you forgive other people? Chris?
For me, me and my brother, we clash heads a lot because it's like brotherly love. But like, when he does something like that really actually hurts me, like, usually I have to go blow off steam, but after like a few minutes I realize like, God forgave me this much for all the shit that I've done.
Yeah.
So why on earth should I hold this bitterness against my brother who did this one little thing that pissed me off?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I had a friend recently who had, I found out had been lying to me, and so I went to him and he apologized for it and he asked for forgiveness and I forgave him, and I was able to help him through the situation and help him to grow in the area that he was struggling with because I had been able to forgive him and not like been mad at him or whatever.
That's cool. So, in forgiving him, now you're able to actually help him
Right.
move
And like
forward.
I said, the only reason I could do it was because I realized that I've done a ton of crap too, and God's forgiven me, so I can forgive him.
Yeah. That's cool. Zach?
considering that like we were like God's enemies, and He still forgave us for every single thing that we did wrong, like the worst of the worst. When I think about that, it makes me feel like it should be easy for me to forgive someone who I love, like my friend, for something that is completely minor compared to that. Like it doesn't even matter compared to what God has forgiven. Like everyone's done like all this stuff, and He forgives every single thing. So just one thing shouldn't be that hard.
That's a good point. Yeah, the Bible says that when we were in our sin, we were God's enemies, and He forgave us. So yeah, when our friend or family member or someone we care about hurts us, how much more should we be able to forgive them? Abby?
When we're in a fight with like our friend or our brothers or something like that, it's normally like something that we do provokes them that like makes them do something that hurts us. So like it's kind of like we deserve it, but like what God did for us, like forgave us for everything, and He like was absolutely perfect. He didn't do anything wrong.
That's a great point. Yeah, a lot of times if you really are honest with yourself, the thing that someone did against you might have been a little provoked, you know. You might have done something to piss them off, to make them hurt you. But that's not the case with God. You know, God didn't do anything wrong, and we sinned against Him, and He chose to forgive us. That's cool, yeah. Thinking about God's forgiveness is really helpful when you're trying to forgive someone else. Like everyone's been saying, you'll realize that this thing that you're mad about is so small compared to what God could have held against you. And it's just releasing that anger and that bitterness that helps you model what God has done. All right, the last thing we need to do when we forgive is actually pay the debt. So like we said, there's this debt left over when people hurt us, and when you forgive, you're choosing to pay it yourself instead of hold them to it. So what does that look like? Well, I love this guy shares his experience with paying the debt. He said, "Once upon a time, I was engaged to a young woman who changed her mind. I forgave her, but only in small amounts over a year. They were made whenever I spoke to her and refrained from rehashing the past. Whenever I renounced jealousy and self-pity. Whenever I saw her with another man. Whenever I praised her to others when I wanted to slice away at her reputation. Those were the payments, but she never saw them, and her own payments were unseen by me. Forgiveness is more than a matter of refusing to hate someone. It is also a matter of choosing to show love and acceptance to the person. So you're making these payments that maybe they don't even know about, but you're not holding it against them. You're choosing to pay it yourself. So what might this look like? Well, you're going to be respectful and warm with them when you want to be cold and mean. You're going to try to rebuild the relationship if it's appropriate. You know, there are some cases where it's not even possible, like if someone's deceased or they're not willing to work with you on rebuilding the relationship. And there's some cases where it might not be appropriate. You know, I've had like ex-boyfriends or something where it's like, you know, after our experiences together, it's just not going to make sense for us to try to be friends. But, you know, we can leave on good terms still. You're not going to criticize them to others. You're just going to decide to refrain from doing that. And if you feel yourself about to do it, you're going to bite your tongue. Say, no, I won't do this. You're not going to replay those videotapes, those mental tapes we were talking about. You're not going to let yourself just feed off of replaying that and dwelling on what they've done. You're going to replace those negative thoughts with good ones. You're going to pray for them. You know, it takes a lot to say, God, I pray that you would bless this person. I pray that you would bless them more than you bless me. To pray for their good. That's paying the debt. You're going to serve and encourage them. You're going to think of ways to help them grow with God, to help them grow as a person.